y'all. So it's been a long court day, and earlier I did a video letting you know what happened in the courtroom and the things that Cassie said during her testimony before lunch. And so now I am going to read the transcript of what happened after lunch. They just wrapped up about 20 minutes ago. So I'm going to go ahead and read you guys this transcript. However, I have looked at majority of the transcript, and then I mean in this second half. So one of the things that I want to do is give a disclaimer and let you guys know that if you are sensitive to hearing vulgar things, you might want to take caution with listening what's to come. If you have children around, please do not have them near you while I'm reading this transcript. There are some very vulgar and disturbing things in her testimony that she talked about that happened to her and the things that Diddy was doing. And it is very disturbing, y'all. Yeah, it brought tears to my eyes reading it, earlier, and so I'm gonna try to get through it. So if you someone who don't take these type of things easily or is triggering or something like that, then I advise you to do whatever it is you need to do. Okay. I would love you to watch my video. I'm not saying that, but if you can't, that's fine too. I just wanted to put that warning out there because it starts getting crazy. It's crazy how we in day two, and it's this intense. But we all knew that Cassie's testimony would be. We figured that. Okay. So yeah, I hope she's okay. They talked about how she cried several times in the courtroom, and the judge took several breaks after lunch because Cassie was breaking down in the courtroom during her testimony, and I'm sure other people in the courtroom was crying as well. It was reported that there was several people crying in the courtroom. So yeah, it's really sad and sick the things that he did. But I'm going to go ahead and get to it. As I always tell you, I am reading a transcript from a journalist who goes to the court dates, and he typed things as is being said. So there will be probably several grammar mistakes. So I'm going to try to make it through it. Along with the vulgar words, I will try to work around those and use alternative words. You guys will have to fill in the blanks. They also talk a lot about substances, and they named them in this transcript. I'm gonna try not to do that and probably give you guys abbreviations or letters that it start with, but I'm not gonna be saying the names of them as those words are sensitive on YouTube. Okay, so let me get to it. I think I said everything I needed to say, and I'm gonna get to it and try to get through it as fast as I possibly can. I don't want this video to be too long, but yeah, let's get started. So they came back, and okay, so the government asked Cassie, "Who was your manager at Bad Boy Records?" Cassie said James Cruz. The government said, "What did he tell you?" Cassie said that he was managing me with one hand tied behind his back. He had to check everything with Sean. The government said, "How did you make money if your records weren't being released?" Cassie said, "I did hosting parties when Sean approved them." The government said, "What comments did Sean make about your physical appearance?" Cassie said that I looked too Mexican with my hair like that. The government said, "How did he like your nails?" Cassie said, "White with French tips." Government said, "Hair?" She said, "It varied. I shaved my head in 2009. The government said, "Your body?" Cassie said, "He told me to work out and prepare for F-off parties." Y'all should know what that is. The government said, "How did you feel about his comments?" Cassie said, "It varied." The government said, "What else did Sean pay for?" Cassie said, "Cars." The government said, "Did he give you cash?" Cassie said, "Yes, but he would take things away depending on how he felt." The government said, "What else would he take away?" Cassie said, "My self-confidence." Wow, y'all. The government said, "Who would take things away?" Cassie said, "Staff." She also said, "I assume staff." And the defense said, "Objection." The judge said, "Jury will disregard that last answer." The government said, who looked your laptop and phone? I guess who looked at your laptop and phone? And Cassie said security. The government said, how long would they be gone for? Cassie said, however long I was being punished for. The government said, how often were you in contact with Sean's staff? Cassie said, daily. The government said, who are in these photos? Cassie said, Christina Coram and Miss Fletcher. The government said, what did you call Miss Coram? Cassie said, KK. The government said, and who is this? Cassie said, D-Rock. He was Sean's security. The government said, how frequently were you in Sean's residences? Cassie said, all the time. The government said, did they all have safes? Cassie said, yes. The government said, what did you observe in them? Cassie said, cash, jewelry, cameras, and videotapes. Pow pows, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to say that word, but she said she's seen them. In New York City, well, in New York, LA, and Miami, and Alpine, New Jersey. So I guess he has residences in all those different places, and she named all of them, okay? The government said, do you recall an incident between Sean and Suge Knight? Cassie said, yes. We were having an F-off in L.A. D-Rock came in and said Suge was down at a diner. Sean drove over there. The government said, what was your reaction? Cassie said, I cried and said, don't do something stupid. The government said, were you ever handed a pow-pow? Cassie said, yes. We were doing we were doing a club or doing to a club. I don't know what, I guess going to a club in downtown LA. We taking mushrooms. I was high. I was told to put the pow pow in my bag. I was freaking out. The government said, who was present? Cassie said, a driver, security, and Sean. Another time, I saw them get dressed and grab pow pows and leave in an SUV. The government said, how long were they gone? Cassie said, 30 to 40 minutes. The government said, let me switch topics. How soon into the relationship did Sean mention voyeurism to you? Cassie said, the first 6 months to a year. Voyeurism, I had to look it up, okay? It's basically someone who like to watch other people do adult activities. Yeah, I don't know why I never heard of that word, but I didn't. So I figured it might be some other people who never heard of it too. Okay, let me keep going. How old were you? Cassie said 22. The government said, why did you agree to a F-off? Cassie said, good question. I wanted to make him happy. The government said, where was the first F-off? Cassie said, one of his homes in LA. The government said, 627. Who is this? Cassie said, the first escort. So I guess that's the numbers for the exhibit that he showed her. He obviously showed her a picture of someone. Okay, so now the government said, do you know his name? Cassie said no. The government said, I'll call him first escort. Were you aware he was paid? Cassie said yes, to dance and to have relations with me. They used another word, but again, I'm working around the words they're using. The government said, what rugs did you take? Cassie said the one that started with an E, C-S, E-C-S, and she said, and alcohol before things started. The government said, did you disguise your appearance? Cassie said, Sean said we should disguise ourselves. I wore a masquerade mask. The government said, what was a session in AF off? Cassie said, well, no, what was a, yeah, I said it right. And Cassie said, until the escort finished. I guess they was asking how long. That's what caught me up right there. That's why I said his grammar mistakes, as I always tell y'all. But he does a very good job, so I'm not complaining, okay? And she said until the escort was finished. And the government said, how many sessions with the first escort? Cassie said 2. The government said, how did you feel? Cassie said, I was high, so I didn't feel much. Dirty and confusion. And that he was happy with me. The government said, why did you feel you couldn't say no? Cassie said, I didn't want to make him angry or upset after he shared this part of himself with me. The government said, how frequent did the F-offs become? Cassie said, weekly for a consistent amount of years. That's what got me, man. The government said, when was your last one? Cassie said 2017 or 2018. The government said, how long were you awake during the F offs? Cassie said, I never slept. I took rugs. And she named three of them. One being something similar to baby powder, if you know what I mean, start with a C. The other one rhymes with poly. And the other one starts with ECS. Okay? So I'm sure y'all can figure that out. The government said, do you recall all of the F offs? Cassie said that would be impossible. The government said, did you want to stop? Cassie said, yes, I was humiliated. I didn't have those words then. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. The government said, did you tell him you didn't want to? Cassie said, yes. I brought it up gently. I didn't want him to just do it with someone else. It's crazy how she was attached to him like that, because even with everything that was going on, she still said that like she didn't want him to do it with anyone else. Ooh, that's just so, it's so confusing how victims think and how they minds work, you know. So that's why people, that do the criticizing, they just don't understand. And I'm even trying to understand. I don't, I don't really get it, but I get it because obviously she was traumatized and young, and he definitely coerced her into doing what he wanted her to do. So anyway, the government said, were you able to express your concerns to him? And the defense said, objection, leading. And the judge said, rephrase. And the government said, why would you talk to him gently? Cassie said, I didn't want him to be angry. The government said, what is this? Cassie said, an email between me and Sean. The government said, what did you call him? Cassie said, Pop Pop. The government said, why? Cassie said, he asked me what I called my grandfather. I did it, but now I think it was disrespectful. So you wanted her to call you what she called her grandfather? The second half, I mean, it's digging into how sick he was, okay? Let me keep going. The government said, what did you write? Cassie said, I really need to F. The government said, why did you write that? Cassie said, because I wanted to be with him. The government said, I'll read your messages. You read yours. What? I'll read your messages. You read yours. Oh, okay. I guess that's what they said. And they said, the government said, you don't want to do anything anymore? You don't want to do anymore? I'm not, the mistakes in the grammar, I guess. But the government, I guess they played the role of somebody, because that's what it sounded like when they said, I'll read your messages, you read yours, or something. I don't get it. And Cassie said, I'm so predictable. The government said, what did you think this meant? Cassie said that he knew I didn't want to do the F-offs anymore, but then I backpedaled. The government said, why? Cassie said to not make him angry. He could be violent. The government said, where did you get your outfit? And Cassie said, pleasure chest, elsewhere. The government said, did you get piercings? Cassie said, yes, Sean came with me. The government said, which of his homes did you have F-offs in? Cassie said, Miami and New York. The government said, what other homes? Cassie said, my home, but also Studio City. The government said, in what other cities? Cassie said, Atlanta and Ibiza. I'm hoping I'm saying it right, but that's international. So this is where the trafficking come into play, okay? Because he's taking her out of the states, taking her internationally to places to have these illegal activities, okay? So it's been a lot of people that's talking stuff that's saying that, I don't see nothing wrong. He was just, he just enjoyed adult activities. I really wanted to say the F word. He just F word, but trying not to say all that stuff. And there's a lot of people that's saying that and trying to justify and saying, well, we don't see anything yet that he did that was illegal. Like, they was adults and she consented. But the thing is, this is only day 2, honey. It seems like the government did a good job laying a foundation. That's what they're doing right now. They laying a foundation. So when they come with the double whammy, it will all make sense. So that's what they doing. They just laying it on, you know what I'm saying, nice and smooth, because it's double whammies that's coming, and it has to make sense and it has to line up. So they really, it seemed like, and it's only day two, but it seemed like they really thought about how they was gonna put this together and, you know, do their thing. But let me keep going, cause honey, I'm running my mouth now, and I still got a ways to go, I believe. Okay, so the government said, at what hotels in New York did you have F-offs? Cassie said in a Trump hotel in Gramercy. The government said Intercontinental. Cassie said 44th Street, yes. The government said elsewhere. Cassie said Mandarin Oriental, Fontainebleau. The government said what names were used. Cassie said Jackie Starr. I used Frank Black. And that's crazy because remember yesterday, if you guys watched my video yesterday, when I believe it was the ex-worker, when the prosecution asked him what name did they ask him to ask for, he said Black. And I even stopped during that part of reading the transcript, and I'm like, Black? So he was calling himself Black? So now it's starting to make sense. That's why I say I think they laid it out in a way where as you go along, things are going to start making more sense. Okay, so let me keep going. The government said, what supplies for the F-offs? And Cassie said Astroglide, baby oil, and condoms. The government said who brought the supplies? Cassie said security and Sean's assistants. The government said which brand of baby oil? Really? Cassie said Johnson's. The government said how was it used? Cassie said Sean said you need to be glistening. Really? This is so sick, y'all. I'm just trying to get y'all what's in here because I really, I don't like the fact that I have to read all this stuff again after I already seen it earlier. But I know it's a lot of people who probably haven't, so I'm going to give it to you. The government said, were there F-offs, hold on, where were, I'm guessing it's grammar mistakes, where were the F-offs? I'm guessing they asking, did they run out of baby oil at the F-offs? Because, honey, the way it's typed out, I don't know what they're trying to ask. And the defense said, objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The government said, you also mentioned Astroglide. The defense said, same objection, irrelevant. The judge said sidebar. So I guess the judge, well, not no guess, the judge pulled both the defense and the prosecutor to the side, and they had a little private talk. And then they came back, and the government said, we were just talking about Astroglide. How was it used? And Cassie said, as a lubricant. The government said, if you ran out, what? Basically, what happened? Cassie said, we'll call either staff or the bell desk and give them a tip. So y'all had the workers, the hotel workers, going to get these things for you? Really? Oh, my goodness. The government said, were the F-offs lit? Okay. I'm trying to like soak it in as I'm reading because some of this stuff I haven't seen yet. Cassie said initially it was a candle, strong smelling glade. That don't make sense. When the government asks were the F-offs lit, I'm thinking they saying like, was it, like jumping? Like, well, you know how, people talk like that, like was the party lit? And she talking about a candle. We're going to keep moving on, okay? The government said any other use of candle wax? Cassie said a few times poured on my body. The government said, who set the temperature of the room? Cassie said, Sean, I was expected to do F-offs on my you-know-what. I didn't know I was going to get to that part that soon. Where is that at? So she was expected to do F-offs during her female monthly you-know-what, okay? That is so disgusting. Let me keep going because I don't want this video to be too long, and it's getting there. Okay, the government said, did you want to do that? Cassie said no. The government said, did you want to be urinated on? The defense said objection. Judge said grounds. The defense said asked and answered. The judge said overruled. Cassie said, no, I did not want it. The government said, how did it feel? Cassie said, it was disgusting. It was too much. I choked. No one could think I wanted it. So that was when he urinated on her. Let me just keep going. I don't know if you guys remember from yesterday, but I'm going to keep going. The government said, why were you choking? Cassie said, too much urine in my mouth. The government said, who else urinated on you? Cassie said, Sean. The government said, did you want Sean to urinate on you? Cassie said, I didn't want anyone to urinate on me. The government said, how often did it happen? Cassie said, often enough. The government said, which hotel charged the most for damage to the room? Cassie said, the Intercontinental in New York. They redecorated the whole room for ridiculous money. The government said, back to the urination. The judge said, Miss Johnson, only a few more questions. The government said, why didn't you say no? Cassie said, it was obvious I didn't want to be on the ground being urinated on by two men. The government said, where did you find escorts? Cassie said, initially Craigslist. It go to show, and then they end up taking a break. They took a break for quite some time, and they end up coming back. But it just go to show what type of sick monster Diddy is, okay? You had some, first of all, he didn't care about it because it's so many reasons. I can't even say because what. Because he hit her, because he let other men hurt her and take advantage of her, because he degraded her. It's so many reasons so I'm not even gonna start going down that list, baby, because it's just too many. It right now is not what he felt about her anymore. It's the sick monster that he is that needs to be revealed. He really needs to be in a mental institution. And that's for real. I don't care what nobody say. That's beyond being a wild freak, okay? That's beyond that. You're degrading. You're sick and mentally ill, okay, at this point. Oh, let me keep going. Let me keep going, y'all. I'm trying to find where I'm at. Okay. The judge said, ready, all rise. Okay, let me see. Okay, the government said, Ms. Ventura, in what cities did you respond to ads on Craigslist? Cassie said, New York. The government said, did you respond to ads on Backpage as well? Cassie said, yes. The government said, who directed you to communicate with escorts? The defense said, objection. The government said, who, if anyone? Defense said, same objection. Assumes a fact, not an evidence. The government said, did you ever reach out to escort independently? Cassie said, no. The government said, did you ever use an escort who arrived? Cassie said, one couldn't perform, so Sean sent him on. The government said, what was a safe escort? Cassie said, not a cop, and someone who not run and tell everyone about their experience with us. The government said, why not a cop? Cassie said, I learned this whole situation was not legal. The defense said, objection. The judge said, jury will disregard that last answer. Why? I don't know why they disregarded it. She said the truth. It's illegal. The government said, how did cash get there? The judge said, why is the judge responding? See, this is another grammar mistake. I guess it's supposed to be Cassie saying security, or he brought it himself. So the government asks, how did cash get there? And either the security brought it or Diddy brought it himself. The government said, the escort Dave, do you know his real name? Cassie said, Clayton Howard. The government said, who is this? And shows her a picture. Cassie said, Daniel. The government said, what service did you use? Cassie said, a dancer service. The government said, do you recognize Jules? Cassie said, yes. The government said, in what cities did you have F off with Jewels? I guess it's Jewels. And Cassie said, New York, LA, and Vegas. The government said, do you know his last name? Cassie said, no. The government said, who is this? Cassie said, I knew him as the Punisher. The government said, did you use rugs at every F off? Cassie said, yes. I needed to disassociate and become emotionless. The government said, who else used rugs at F-offs? uh, Cassie said Sean did. Sometimes the escort. The government said, what other drugs did you use? Cassie said special. I don't know if I can say it, but I'm just gonna say special. If you know what that is, then you know what it is. Another one is abbreviated as GHB. I'm guessing I could say that. And mushrooms. I'm guessing I could say that too. The government said, I'll read Sean's part of this email. You read you. And then Cassie said, when should I take this thing? When will you be here? And the government, playing like they did, he said, pausing you there. What did you mean? What? Cassie said rugs. And the government said, I took mine. I'm flying. What does he mean? So now they asking her, what did he mean by that? And Cassie said it meant that he was high. So him saying, I took mine, I'm flying, that means he was already high. He took his. Y'all probably got that. I just had to register for me for a second. Okay, the government said, why did you take more rugs? Cassie said, to not be present with the experience. The government said, why? Cassie said, because it was something I hated. The government said, how did you react to the ECS rug? I already told y'all, I'm not going to say it, but that's what they asking about. And to MDMA. Cassie said, it could make me vomit. The government said, what would he say? And Cassie said to continue. So he'll tell her to continue even if she felt like she needed to vomit or even if she did. The government said, did you want to continue to have relations when you wanted to vomit? Cassie said no. The government asked her how did the G substance make her feel. And she said drunk and tipsy. The government asked her how the baby powder made her feel. Start with a C. She said makes my heart race. I'm not a huge fan. And they asked her about the mushrooms, and she said the walls come alive. What? Oh my goodness. And so they end up taking another break. I told you it was several breaks. Okay, okay, now then they picked back up, and the government said, when rugs ran out, how did you know who to reach out to? Cassie said, Shaw would tell me. The government said, during the session, how would you know how to move to the next step? And she said, Sean. The government said, what would happen after the escort finished you? Cassie said, Sean would want it put on his body in the next room. I'm hoping you guys are following me here because I'm trying to just hurry up and get past this part. I'm going to read it again. What will happen? The government asked her what will happen after the escort finished on you. So y'all get the drift. After he finished on her. Cassie said that Sean would want it put on his body in the next room. The government asked her, did you do that? She said, I did. The government asked her where. She said, usually on his nipples. The government said, did you want to do that? She said, no. The government said, how did you feel? Cassie said, I was an object, being heavily objectified by men. Sometimes he would watch by FaceTime. The government said, were some sessions recorded on your devices? Cassie said, because they were there, not sure what that's meaning. It seemed like something is missing. But the government said, if you saw them on your device, what would you do? She said, I would delete them. The government said, why? Cassie said, they were disgusting. I never wanted anyone to see them. The government said, were Sean's devices used sometime? Cassie said, yes, I asked him to delete them. The government said, did he? She said, I don't know. The government said, did you ever leave an F off before it was over? Cassie said, yes, at the Century City Intercontinental. I finally had a premiere coming up, and I didn't want to mess it up. But Sean hit me. The government said, at what point did Sean hit you? Cassie said, between sessions. The government said, what happened next? Cassie said, I got to the elevator. Next thing I knew, I was thrown to the ground. The government said, who threw you down? Cassie said, Sean. He grabbed me by my neck and my hoodie. The government said, let me show you a video. And then they showed the hotel hallway video, and they showed it to her, and then the government said, "What are you doing?" And Cassie said, "Trying to use the hotel phone." The government said, "What is Sean doing?" Cassie said, "Taking my phone and my bag." And then the judge said, "We'll break for the day. So it will pick up where it left off tomorrow morning." Okay? That was hard to get through. It's really sad what Cassie went through. I sympathize with her. You know, a lot of people are asking questions. A lot of insane people are asking questions like, why didn't she leave? And I don't want to say insane because I don't really want to judge people, because at one point in my life, you know, I did ask those same questions like, why do people stay around? Why you just don't leave or do something? But you have to realize, for one, she was 19 years old, inexperienced, and he was way older than her. He knew what he was doing. He played that girl. She was young, and she ended up falling in love, and she was doing anything to try to make him happy, and he didn't care about her at all. On top of the fact that he was mentally ill, and he couldn't have cared about her if he wanted to, because something is mentally wrong with him is what's going on. Okay? And everything in his video is alleged. But based on her testimony, every something is he's mentally ill, okay? Something is seriously wrong with him. I don't want to make this video too long. The purpose of this video is to just get the transcript to y'all and not give so much of my opinion. I might do a separate video on that. Y'all know I love to give my opinion. But I'm not going to do that because reading the transcripts is already so long. And then there's so many people that is live all over that is covering the story and doing the videos, and they extremely long. So I don't want to do the same thing. I want it to be to where you guys could just come listen to the transcript, hit a full thing without all these breaks in between, and you can just find out what happened in the courtroom without having to sit for so long just to get the information of what's going on. And reading the scripts is a task in itself, because there are grammar mistakes. I'm trying to make sure I don't say a word, so I'm reading it kind of slow, and you know, trying to not read too fast so that I don't end up saying a word that I don't have no business saying, and then have to do a whole lot of edits. Yeah, other than that, y'all tell me what y'all think about this in the comments. It's been a long day following this trial and keeping up with everything that's going on in this case. I feel sorry for Cassie. I hope that it gave a lot of insight to people, especially the ones who's been very judgmental in this case. Stop judging. I realize you never know how somebody feel or the reasons they do things unless you're in their shoes. I realize that I am very critical myself a lot. It's on this, and I have been on this channel, but I don't plan to do that throughout the course of this trial when it comes to Cassie. I'm gonna say to Cassie because everybody else, baby, it's an open playing field for y'all. Because depending on who they put up there on that stand, I might light them up. I might light them up. Because like I said, and I'm gonna keep on saying, everybody is not a witness. I got a feeling some of the people that's getting up there are accomplices. Don't forget that there is a list of 190 celebrities and public figures that is somehow tied to this trial. So until those names on that list is revealed, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm going to be good during this whole trial. Because if you've been following me long enough, you know one thing. Nelly don't know how to be good. But when it comes to Cassie, I'm going to do just that. I am going to be good. And I do sympathize with her. And I feel bad for her. And I'm praying for her. This girl is pregnant and having to relive 10 years worth of abuse, okay? So I'm hoping that she is resting this evening after a long day in court, and she's able to just stay, manage her energy. She's brave for doing what she's doing. Her husband is by her side through this. Thank God she has a husband to be by her side and be her backbone and support. And I hope her family is doing that too, and friends. through this process because it's long and drawn out, and she probably been waiting a very long time to have her day in court, and it's finally here. Sadly, it's during her pregnancy, but I hope that God keep his hand over her during her pregnancy and keep her strong in everything, and she needs to know that she got a lot of support out here from people. So with that being said, this video is already too long, so I'm going to see you guys tomorrow morning, or maybe, I don't think I'm going to do too much or nothing else tonight. It was still several things I wanted to talk about, and I might do that early in the morning doing my morning video. So until next time, y'all, I am out. Tell me what y'all think about this in the comments, because this testimony was really intense today, and I got a feeling it's going to get even worse. See y'all later. Bye.